What if I told you, one of the greatest empires in human history didn't just rise once it survived, again and again, for over 5,000 years. An empire that ruled from Europe to India to Africa, becoming the world's first true superpower. But this isn't just a story of power. Because unlike other empires, this one didn't just conquer the world, it absorbed it. Invaders came, Greeks, Arabs, Mongols, each one trying to destroy Persia. And yet, something unexpected happened. Instead of disappearing, Persia changed them. Its culture, its language, its identity survived every invasion. And then, in the 20th century, something even stranger happened. Persia changed its own name, becoming what we now call Iran. Why? Why would one of the oldest civilizations in history rewrite its own identity? This is not just history. This is a story of resilience, of survival, of a civilization that refused to die. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments which country's history do you want next. Long before Rome, before Alexander, before even the idea of empire truly existed, there was Persia, a land of harsh deserts, towering mountains, and scattered tribes fighting to survive. Nothing about it looked like the beginning of a superpower, but history doesn't begin with power. It begins with a person. His name was Cyrus the Great. And he didn't just build an empire, he changed the meaning of one. At the time, the world was ruled by fear. Kings conquered lands, enslaved people, destroyed cultures. Power meant domination. But Cyrus was different. When he began his rise, Persia wasn't dominant, it was under the control of the Medes. A smaller force, underestimated, ignored, until Cyrus rebelled. What followed wasn't just a war, it was the start of something unstoppable. He defeated the Medes, but instead of destroying them, he united them. That was the first sign. Cyrus wasn't just conquering land. He was building something bigger. Then came the real test, the great kingdoms of the ancient world. Lydia fell. Babylon, the most powerful city of its time, fell. But what happened next shocked everyone. Because when Cyrus entered Babylon, he didn't burn it. He didn't enslave its people. He freed them. Temples were restored. Religions were respected. Cultures were protected. For the first time in history, an empire wasn't built on fear. It was built on respect. This wasn't weakness. This was strategy. Because people didn't just obey Cyrus, they accepted him. And that changed everything. The empire grew rapidly, stretching across continents, connecting different worlds into one system. Trade flourished, ideas spread, cultures mixed. And just like that, the Persian Empire became something the world had never seen before. The first true superpower. But power like this doesn't go unnoticed, because as Persia rose, so did enemies. And beyond its borders, a storm was coming. One that would test whether this empire was truly unbreakable. By the time Cyrus was gone, the empire didn't fall, it expanded. Under kings like Darius I, Persia became something even more powerful, not just in size, but in control. This wasn't chaos anymore, it was a system. Roads stretched across thousands of kilometers. Messages traveled faster than ever before. Trade connected distant lands. Gold flowed. Order was maintained. Persia wasn't just strong, it was efficient. At its peak, the empire ruled over millions of people from Egypt to India. Different languages, different cultures, different beliefs. And yet, it worked. Because Persia didn't try to erase differences, it managed them. But power like that creates fear. And in the West, that fear had a name. Greece. Small city-states, divided, constantly fighting each other. But they had one thing in common. They refused to bow. Tension grew. Messages turned into threats. Threats turned into war. And then, everything exploded. The Persian Empire, now under Xerxes I, prepared for one of the biggest military campaigns the world had ever seen. This wasn't just an invasion. It was a statement. A massive army moved toward Greece: soldiers, ships, resources, and unstoppable force. Against them, a handful of Greek city-states. Outnumbered, outmatched, but not broken. At Battle of Thermopylae, a small Greek force stood against the Persian army. For days, they held. Not because they could win, but because they refused to surrender. And even though Persia eventually crushed them, something changed. Because this war wasn't just about victory anymore. It became a symbol. Greece fought back again at sea, on land, with strategy and determination. And slowly, the impossible started happening. Persia, the greatest empire in the world, began to struggle. Battles were lost. Momentum shifted. Confidence cracked. This wasn't the fall yet. But it was the first time. Persia looked vulnerable. And once an empire shows weakness, the world notices. Because far to the west, a young conqueror was watching, waiting, learning, and he wasn't just coming to fight Persia, he was coming to end it. By now, Persia was still massive, still powerful, still feared, but something had changed. It wasn't unstoppable anymore, and that was enough. Because in the west, a new kind of leader was rising. Not just a king, a conqueror. His name was Alexander the Great. Young, relentless, and obsessed with one goal: to defeat Persia. Not just fight it, destroy it. When Alexander began his campaign, it almost seemed impossible. Persia was still the largest empire on earth. Its armies were vast, its resources unmatched. But Alexander had something different: speed, strategy, and absolute belief. He didn't wait. He moved fast, striking deep into Persian territory before they could fully react. City after city began to fall. The Persian king at the time, Darius III, tried to stop him. And finally, they faced each other at the Battle of Gaugamela. This wasn't just a battle. This was everything. Persia's massive army against a smaller but unstoppable force. On paper, Persia should have won. More soldiers, better position, more power. But wars aren't won on numbers alone. Alexander attacked with precision. He broke through lines, created chaos, turned order into confusion, and then Darius ran. The moment the king fled, the empire broke. Because empires aren't just built on land, they're built on belief. And in that moment, Persia lost it, one by one. Its great cities fell. Babylon, Susa, Persepolis, the heart of the empire, burned, destroyed. Everything Cyrus had built, everything that made Persia the first superpower, collapsed, just like that. It should have been the end, another empire erased from history. But something unexpected happened. Alexander didn't just conquer Persia, he admired it, its culture, its way of ruling. Instead of wiping it out, he adopted it. Persian customs lived on. Persian influence spread. Even in defeat, Persia didn't disappear. It transformed. Because this wasn't just an empire. It was something deeper, something that couldn't be destroyed by one man or one war. And after Alexander's death, the story wasn't over, because Persia was about to rise again. It should have ended there. After Alexander the Great burned Persepolis, after the Persian king fell, after the empire shattered, Persia should have become just another lost civilization. But it didn't. Because Persia wasn't just land, it was identity. After Alexander's death, his empire didn't stay united. It broke apart, his generals fighting each other for control. And in that chaos, Persia found its chance. From the east, a new power began to rise: the Parthians. Led by fierce warriors and brilliant strategists, they didn't try to rebuild Persia the same way. They adapted. They fought differently. Fast, mobile, unpredictable. Their cavalry dominated battlefields. Arrows rained down before enemies could even react. And slowly, they took back what was lost. Persia was alive again. But now, it faced a new enemy: Rome. Two giants of the ancient world standing face to face. On one side, the disciplined legions of Rome. On the other, the swift and deadly forces of Persia. And for centuries, they clashed. Borders shifted. Armies marched. Victories were won and lost. But neither side could destroy the other. Because Persia had learned something important. Survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about being unbreakable. Then came another transformation. A new dynasty rose stronger, more organized, more ambitious: the Sasanians. They didn't just restore Persia, they revived its glory. Massive cities were built, trade expanded, art, science, and culture flourished again. And this time Persia stood equal to Rome. Not weaker, not fading, but powerful. Once again, the rivalry became legendary. two superpowers shaping the world through constant conflict and competition. But while Persia fought Rome in the west, something was rising in the south, something different. Not an empire, not a kingdom, but an idea. A force that would spread faster than any army and change Persia forever, because this time, it wouldn't just challenge Persia's power, it would challenge its identity. By the 7th century, Persia was still standing, still powerful and proud. But after centuries of war with Rome, it was tired, weakened. And that's when something unexpected appeared. Not a massive empire, not a legendary king, but a rapidly rising force. From the deserts of Arabia, driven by a new belief, a new unity, new purpose. Within years, this force expanded faster than anyone had imagined. And soon, it reached Persia. The Sasanian Empire, the last great Persian dynasty, faced this new challenge. Battle after battle followed, and then, the deciding moment. At the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah, Persia fell, its army collapsed, power shattered, empire finally broken. This time, it felt different. Because this wasn't just another invasion, this was a complete shift. Persia came under Arab rule. A new religion, Islam, began to spread across its lands. And history seemed ready to repeat itself, another great civilization, about to disappear. But Persia didn't disappear, it adapted. Because instead of resisting completely, it absorbed. Persians adopted Islam, but they didn't lose themselves. They reshaped it. Persian language survived. Persian traditions continued. Persian culture remained strong. And slowly, something incredible happened. The conquerors were influenced by the conquered. Persian scholars, poets, and thinkers began shaping the intellectual world of the Islamic Empire. Science, literature, philosophy. Persia was everywhere. Even though it had been defeated, its identity was still alive, stronger than ever. Because this was Persia's true power, not just conquering land, but surviving everything, even defeat. Empires came and went. Invaders arrived again and again. Turks, Mongols, others. Each time, destruction followed. And each time, Persia returned. Different, changed, but never gone. Because Persia had mastered something no empire ever could: transformation. And after thousands of years of survival, one final change was coming. A decision that would redefine its identity forever. Because Persia was about to become Iran. After thousands of years, countless wars, endless invasions, Persia was still here. Not as the same empire, not as the same power, but as something far more rare. A civilization that refused to disappear. Empires had come and gone. Names had changed. Borders had shifted. But the identity remained. And then, in the 20th century, something unexpected happened. Not a war, not an invasion, a decision. In 1935, under the rule of Reza Shah, Persia officially asked the world to call it by a different name, Iran. But why? Why would one of the oldest names in history simply change? The answer wasn't about erasing the past. It was about reclaiming identity. Because the word Persia was what outsiders used, a name given by the Greeks, based on one region of the empire. But Iran was what the people themselves had always known. A name rooted in ancient language meaning land of the Aryans. This wasn't a break from history. It was a return to it. A reminder that even after everything, the core identity had survived. But the story doesn't end there. Because modern Iran is not the same as ancient Persia. It carries layers of empires, religions, cultures, revolutions. From ancient kings to modern politics, from fire temples to mosques, Iran became a blend of everything it had experienced. A living history. And that's what makes this story different from every other empire. Because most civilizations rise and fall. They peak and disappear. But Persia changed. Again and again. Each time adapting, surviving, proving something powerful. That true strength isn't about never falling. It's about never staying down. Today, when people hear the name Iran, they often think of the present, politics, conflicts, headlines. But behind that name is a history that stretches back 5,000 years. A story of resilience, of identity, of survival against everything. because Persia never truly ended. It evolved. And maybe that's the real lesson of history. Not who conquered the most land, but who managed to endure. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button. And if you want more powerful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. Also, tell me in the comments which part of this story surprised you the most, and which country's history you want next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.